Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we are revisiting the Mindsplice apparatus control archetype, but instead of playing it alongside some white cards, we're playing it in the sultai colors, so blue, black, and green. Our key card is this 4-mana artifact, has flash, so we can keep up interaction as much as possible and then flash it in the opponent's end step, and then at the beginning of our upkeep we can put an oil counter on it, and then instant and sorcery spells we cast get a 1-mana discount for each oil counter on this artifact. So the discount keeps getting bigger and bigger as the game progresses, and we can also speed up that process by proliferating the oil counters with experimental augury. We get to look at the top 3 cards of our library, putting 1 in hand, the rest on the bottom, and we proliferate, so we can put additional oil counters on the apparatus. Can also be useful when you're facing the overlords, as you can put an additional time counter on them if the opponent impended them, so you can postpone them being able to attack you for an extra turn. And then the main reason we're dipping into the sultai colors is for Rakshasa's Bargain. This 3-mana instant looks at the top 4 cards of our library, putting 2 of them in hand and the rest in graveyard. I say 3-mana instant since most of the time we're casting it for a black, a green, and a blue, but it's technically a 6-mana value card when it's in our graveyard, for instance, which is relevant for collect evidence purposes, as we'll see in just a second. And of course, the generic mana cost alternative is also very relevant with Mindsplice apparatus. If we have 6 or more oil counters in total on our Mindsplice apparatus, we can now cast the Rakshasas Bargain for free, which is incredibly powerful, and then it's often going to chain into more card draw and more interaction. But it is quite flexible. Let's say we have 4 oil counters on the apparatus, then we can cast it for just a single colored mana, so it kind of scales very nicely as the apparatus picks up more oil counters. And then we also have the full set of 3 Steps Ahead, another card that pairs beautifully with Mindsplice apparatus, as we can scale the amount of modes we select as we get more oil counters. First it's maybe just a 3-mana counter spell, but then later it can also draw 2 and discard, or better yet, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature we control, so we can get another Mindsplice going, giving us more oil counters and in turn an even bigger discount going forward. Then another counterspell that scales well with the Mindsplice on the battlefield is Spectral Denial. Can cast it for X and a blue, countering target spell unless its controller pays X. So the more oil counters, the bigger the discount, and we can sometimes just cast it for a single blue mana to counter any spell the opponent plays. Don't have any 4-powered creatures to further discount it, but it's good enough for this deck. Sadly, don't have Syncopate in Standard, which would have been a nice little upgrade, exiling the spell as well, but don't have that one in Standard at the moment. Then we also have some spot removal to hopefully keep up against aggro decks. Anoint with Affliction I've selected as it exiles the creature in question, so a good answer to a Heartfire hero that maybe picked up some +1 counters, and then it can still deal with most of the creatures out of the various red aggro decks. And then a Shielder's Edict can be very effective against the various aura, hexproof strategies, as well as being able to answer planeswalkers. And as a one-off, we can also search it up with our 2 copies of Mystical Teachings, an instant that lets us search our library for any other instant card or card with flash, reveal it, and put it into our hand. So this can also help find a Mindsplice apparatus if we don't have one in play already, and we can also flash it back for 5 and a black, so in the late game that's sometimes just a single black mana to flash it back to do it all over again. So that's why you see a couple one-offs in this deck, such as Aetherize, which we can also maybe find with the Teachings, returning all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. So maybe not quite as good as Settle the Wreckage, but it does a pretty good impersonation. And then the Urgent Necropsy is another instant we can find with Teachings, and is another card that plays very well with the Rakshasa's Bargain, filling the graveyard, and being a 6-mana card itself for collect evidence purposes, as we get to collect evidence X, where X is the total mana value of permanence we target, and then we can destroy an artifact, creature, enchantment, and planeswalker, potentially all 4 of those at the same time. And then at 5 mana, we've got more sweepers with Deadly Cover-Up, also making use of the collect evidence mechanic to destroy all creatures and then potentially exile a card from the opponent's graveyard, as well as that same card out of their hands and library, so it can be very effective against go-wide creature decks, as well as against certain combo decks that rely on a single card. And then I'm also trying a one-off Death Begets Life. Now this is a sorcery, so won't be able to find it with Mystical Teachings, and it does cost 8 mana, so hopefully we can discount it with our Mindsplice apparatus, but it can be very effective in certain matchups, as we get to destroy all creatures and enchantments, drawing a card for each permanent destroyed this way. So against all the pixie decks that have a lot of enchantments lingering around, this can blow them all up and draws a ton of cards. Against the domain control strategies, we get to blow up all the opponent's beanstalks and leyline bindings, as well as kills all their overlords that might be impended as well, so that's an awesome card in that matchup as well. And then last but not least, we've got some powerful X spells we can sink a ton of mana into thanks to our Mindsplice apparatus. Finale of Revelation could just be a powerful card draw spell in the mid to late game, but once we get to X equals 10 or more, we also get to shuffle our graveyard back into our library, draw that many cards, untap up to 5 lands, and then have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. So that's very useful if we've maybe milled some key cards with our Rakshasas Bargain in the early game, and then it also means we've got all that interaction available once again to mess with the opponent's deck, but either way a very powerful effect, especially with a large Mindsplice, giving us a huge discount with all the cards we've just picked up. And then the Outrageous Robbery is our actual win condition, can exile the top X cards of the opponent's library face down, we get to play those cards, and also just by exiling that many cards from the opponent's library, we might just be able to mill the opponent out, and then the opponent's going to lose on their next draw step if they have an empty library. So if we end up milling the Robbery early on with a Bargain, we still have our 2 Revelations to maybe shuffle it back, so we'll have access to it later. And then it's also an instant, so we can also find it with our Mystical Teachings. And then in our mana base, we also have a Mysterize Village to maybe make one of our spells uncounterable if we sink additional mana into it, and that can be very important against other control decks to make sure a Finale of Revelation or Robbery resolves. And then we've got plenty of basics to find with our Fabled Passage, couple Surveil lands to play early, and these are also good at setting up our Verge lands. And then we're mainly focusing on blue mana, since we do need blue mana early for Spectral Denial and Augury. We also need double blue for 3 steps ahead, so that's the main color we're focusing on. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's a little slow to get going. 2 Mystical Teachings cover up. I think we mulligan. This seems better. Can keep Augury and 2 counter spells. Bottom the Finale for now, since it's only going to be powerful once we have more mana. And then Annoyance seems fine to keep, just so we have some spot removal. So then we're looking for Mindsplice Apparatus. Opponent blue-white. We've got a pretty good setup against Omniscience combo, thanks to our many counter spells. If our opponent's also on control, then it's going to be a lengthy battle. But yeah, Conduit Pylons points towards Omniscience combo. So I don't think we need to necessarily fight over the Archaeologist. We just need to keep our counter spells for Abuelo's Awakening. So no Omniscience in graveyard yet, so we can Augury and find Mindsplice. A land is good. Don't need Annoyance. I could Denial the stock up here. That seems reasonable, although again, we could just keep our counters for the cards that matter. And there's not too many of those. Opponent discarded Omniscience. Alright, so we've got a few answers in hands. And if they don't go for it, we can Apparatus to set up our 3 steps ahead even better. Possible they've got their own counterspell, like another Confounding Riddle. And then if we can find our Sweeper, we can also maybe extract a key card out of the opponent's deck, such as Omniscience. Opponent did have another Riddle. So the game goes on. Not going to be able to tap out main phase for another Apparatus, but it is a good draw. Archaeologists resolves. Could Apparatus now, before they find another counterspell. A lockdown we don't care about. End of turn Apparatus again. Alright, another Riddle. So, not every deck necessarily plays the full set, but that also means they have fewer ways to interact with our counter spells going forward. Although it would have been nice to get an Apparatus in play. Another Archaeologist. This time finds the Invasion. And I could draw and discard with 3 steps ahead, just to keep hitting my land drops. Feels like a bit of a waste, but if our opponent just keeps hitting land drops and plays the invasion, that could end up being annoying too. And then I don't need annoyance particularly, even though it can also be used as removal on the Whale's Awakening Omniscience before the opponent can go infinite. But I think it's still the weakest card. So if our opponent casts the invasion, I don't really need to fight over it, although they might get something like a negate. I think we just bargain in response and then see what else we find. Alright, land and maybe another land. Opponent gets a negate, like we suspected. So I do need to keep up multiple counter spells now if our opponent goes Awakening plus negate backup. So I guess for now I'll play an untapped land, maybe next turn I'll play the Hedge Maze. Our opponent goes for Awakening, only leaving up 1 mana. So I can denial for X equals 2. Or we could counter plus draw. We only get punished if our opponent has a Spell Pierce in hand, which is a possibility. Yeah, because next turn they're probably going to go for it again, but maybe with negate backup. So I think I do counter draw. And hope I don't get punished. Alright. Land can go. And there's a deadly cover-up, so if I cast it now, I should be able to extract their Will's Awakening or their Omniscience, and then that should be pretty strong here. Can keep up denial for 1, does that matter? Maybe it does. And then, yeah, I think Awakening over Omniscience, although could also go for Omniscience itself. And then Awakening can get back temporary lockdown as a sort of win condition. Let's go with Awakening. Our opponent had 2 in hand. Double Invasion, Omniscience, Lockdown, Negate. Quick look at their library. They have 1 of Abolisher, good to know. Blast Zone. Alright, so that's Awakening dealt with. Opponent draws 2. So now they need to try and hardcast Omniscience or just use Invasion for value. I think we still let that resolve. Opponent got this town ain't big enough. Find Mystical Teachings. So, yeah, I'll play Hedge Maze. Although I guess I can Teachings for Apparatus and cast the Apparatus. So that could be worth it. Although now Blast Zone's an answer to my 4-mana artifact. And get Apparatus. I can cast it, my opponent might fight over it with negate. Or they could try and bounce it with this town ain't big enough. Alright, so 1 Apparatus left in the deck. Can flash back Teachings to maybe grab it. Moment of Truth resolves. Yeah, we do have to watch out for the Abolisher still, since that's a way they can prevent me from interacting further. Opponent's gonna stock up. And let's flashback Teachings. A riddle, I think, is unless you pay 4, if I'm not mistaken. I'll grab another Mindsplice. Could also go for bargain and cast it. Since we're maybe just looking for another deadly cover-up at this point. Yeah, you know what? Don't really need Mindsplice. And there's cover-up, as well as maybe a finale. So let's double check confounding riddle. Yeah, it's unless you pay 4. So I could just cover up to extract omniscience. So now our opponent needs to very slowly cast their invasion to get their remaining win conditions. And Anoint doesn't seem necessary. Alright, so the game continues. Opponent's got 19 cards left, we've got 26. The invasion might still be able to get another useful card out of the sideboard. So I do have to be a little bit careful with that one. Stock up resolves. They're probably getting close to the Abolisher. So at this point, if we can resolve a robbery, we can essentially mill the opponent out. So that's maybe the next card we're looking for. For now, just land and augury. Opponent's gonna bounce their 2 cards, that's fine. And got a discard to hand size. Alright, so going for a big finale is a little risky, for opponent did pick up another confounding riddle here. So I could just pass a turn. Could also cast a smaller finale. Yeah, currently the max amount would be X equals 9, so that's not enough to untap any lands. So let's just play patiently. Pass with 3 counterspells and augury. Interesting, with augury we could also proliferate the opponent's blast zone counter. If they get it up to 4 to maybe deal with apparatus, we can get it up to 5 all of a sudden. And the invasion can resolve. I guess they could get back a counterspell out of their graveyard with it. But nope, opponent's got a Jeskai Revelation as a potential win condition. Although no red mana unless they use pylons, I suppose. So that can fix for red. Stock up. Opponent's seen their entire deck by now. So if I can find a land, I believe I can set up Revelation for 10. And then opponent cannot counter with a riddle. May as well proliferate an extra defense counter here. Opponent's got a discard to hand size again. So no robbery to win the game on the spot. But finale for 10 seems worthwhile. No maximum hand size, untap my lands. And I could cast another deadly cover-up, although we don't have a graveyard to collect evidence right now. So yeah, I'll just pass it back. So they might lead with Grand Abolisher. Revelation target me, we can counter with 3 steps ahead. And then augury, look for robbery. Another Mindsplice or Teachings. Teachings can get the robbery. Opponent's got 9 cards left, so if I Teachings for Robbery, I can cast it for X equals 7 here. So it's not quite lethal, so we'll have to wait one more turn cycle, but I think we'll be alright. I'm debating whether or not I should reorganize my hand. Alright, fine. Invasion, that seems fine. Can get back the Jeskai Revelation. Yep. End of turn Mindsplice. Yeah, this seems like a tough matchup for the Omniscience deck. Teachings for Robbery. Untap. And that should be game over. So 8 cards remain. X equals 8. Could also Augury first to get an extra counter on the apparatus. Maybe that's technically correct here. Maybe I actually should have gotten the village to make my spell uncounterable. But yeah, we've got counterspell backup. Opponent tries to counter with Riddle. We denial back unless you pay 3. And we've got a couple more counter spells in hand. Alright, sweet. Pass a turn. And our opponent explodes. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand, just missing Mindsplice Apparatus pretty much. And then we have spot removal, so we can potentially let a creature resolve, and then counter another one with a denial. We'll need to hit some land drops with Augury and Bargain. And Apparatus I'll keep, even though I still need lands to cast it. Augury can help with that. Facing black-white. Could be a Pixie deck. Could be maybe a life gain Reanimator deck, who knows. Alright, Overlord. So not entirely sure which direction our opponent is headed. Could be a multicolor Domain deck. And yeah, Up the Beanstalk is probably a must counter, since it'll provide a lot of value over the course of a game. Alright, at least I hit my land drop. And then I can Augury. So our opponent will have Leyline Binding, most likely, to answer the Apparatus. Sadly, didn't find a land, but I'll take a Bargain. Do I need to main phase Bargain for a land? I think so. And then get Sewers plus Passage. Teachings we can eventually flash back. Alright, so a bit of a clunky start, but hopefully next turn we can pass with an end of turn Mindsplice. Opponent did have another Overlord. I did say no to some of our sweepers, but we'll still have them in the deck, and we're about to maybe shuffle it back in. So we can pass here. A mana short of making Mindsplice uncounterable, but that's okay. And Beza. So Beza is gonna make a treasure and draw a card. Sure. No real way of stopping that. So yeah, we probably need to find our sweeper now. I'll fetch another black source. So Bargain currently does not really get a discount from Mindsplice. I guess we can also think about getting Etherize if our opponent attacks all out again next turn. Although I'm probably still taking 8. So it's gonna hurt a little bit. But then we can fire off Bargain and dig pretty deep. Opponent's gonna analyze. Sure. Does mean the Overlord's no longer in the graveyard for us to maybe extract out of their library. And get another Overlord. If they impend it, I'll first cast Bargain to see if we find a sweeper. And then if not, I might want to counter it after all. Opponent passes with mana up. We cast Bargain. And there's a Leyline Binding, which I'm now going to counter, so they can't get rid of Apparatus. Just the one mode, sadly. And then we found Cover Up, perfect. And an Augury I can still cast. And take another land. Can also put another time counter on the Overlord, that's a pretty cool interaction. Since I don't mind delaying it some more. And then now Deadly Cover Up. Wouldn't be able to get rid of the Overlord in hand, but we can extract the Leyline Bindings, which are otherwise kind of annoying. And just get rid of a Bargain. Opponent does have Zur in hand, good to know about. So that can also present lethal out of nowhere. Quick peek at the rest of their deck. Ride's End, Overlords, Lockdown, Zur, Get Lost doesn't hit artifacts. And then Beanstalks. Okay, so... don't hit my spot. Can Teachings for 3, get another counterspell if needed. Opponent goes for Zur, so they have mana to activate on Overlord, which would hit me for 6. That's a little scary, so I might want to just counter Zur instead. Otherwise our opponent gets to make more insects, so then it's also protected from a potential Edict. So I can get a 3 steps ahead. And then counter. And can I make a copy? That's 6 mana, so it's just counter draw. Alright, an Anoint can go. Opponent can still impend another Overlord. Aetherize, a nice answer to the tokens. How much mana do I have total if I were to cast a big Revelation? 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I can cast one for 10, which seems worthwhile. Untap 5 lands. And then have a ton of interaction available still. So end of turn the Overlord comes into play. I don't think we want to proliferate. I will Aetherize. So that way I can cover up the Overlord and get rid of remaining copies in the deck. So we just need to deal with the one that's left. So for now I can just flash in another Mindsplice. And yeah, we don't need to worry about leyline binding end of turn since we extracted those. And there's another cover-up. Do need to collect enough evidence first, but that's where Bargain cast for free is pretty useful. Yeah, that's the power of Mindsplice and Bargain. Find another one. But now we can cover up. And with collect evidence, get rid of Overlord. And I might actually want to extract Zur instead of the Overlord. But yeah, opponent has seen enough. It's just because countering an Overlord's a little easier than a 3-mana creature. And there we have it, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, missing a couple colors here. So sadly don't think I can keep, although I do have Augury, which helps. And we have Mindsplice already. So if Augury finds black mana, we're most of the way there. Alright, let me try it against better judgment. Blue-red, so maybe Prowess aggro. For now, Siren could also be the Oculus deck. Not sure which we prefer fighting. I guess Oculus we can easily exile with the Annoyance. And if they cast a Steel Cutter, I don't have an immediate answer. So yeah, it does look like Oculus. Fear resolves. And then Augury needs to find a land. And for now, probably Swamp over Hedge Maze. Could also play Sewers, Augury again. Could also exile the Fear end of turn. Yeah, you know what, let's play Sewers. And then Verge I'll keep. Could hang on to the Augury to cast with Apparatus in play. Next turn I could also just double Affliction to deal with the board. Inti. So that can present quite a bit of damage. Yeah, casting Augury now feels like a bit of a waste. So I think I'll hang on to it. And then I might need to Anoint before we proceed to cast the Apparatus. Finding a board wipe would also be useful. I mean, I could still go for Mindsplice and let them hit me for another turn. And then next turn we get to reap the rewards. That's assuming they don't Spell Pierce me, which is also a possibility. And we're a little short of activating the village to make our spells uncounterable. That's basically +2 mana to whatever spell we're trying to cast. So getting Mindsplice Spell Pierced would hurt more than getting one of the Annoyance countered. So let's try this first. That works. Also exiled an enchantment, which is relevant for Delirium. And another Siren, so they are tapped out of Spell Pierce mana, should they have it. And then I'll Anoint once again. No exploring for you. But there's still an Inti in play, which can deal a lot of damage. But our opponent's done discarding to it. Alright, so I could main phase Mindsplice just to make sure it doesn't get Spell Pierced. Opponent's got free reign to do whatever they want here. But now Aether Eye is also useful pickup. Helping hand back the Scholar. Don't expect them to have any answers to the Apparatus once in play. Now I did use both of my Annoyance, so if Oculus shows up, we don't have a clean way to exile it. Ooh, Tersa Light Shatter as well. So yeah, that's a good random exile from Inti. So finding a board wipe would be ideal. Otherwise, I could Aetherize to bounce the opponent's creatures back, but they will eventually enter the battlefield a second time. And most of them have some sort of enter the battlefield ability. So take 6. I can augury right now and find a deadly cover-up. And then we can cast it with collect evidence. Gonna keep Anoint in circulation for Oculus. And then what to exile here. Alright, it looks like our opponent has seen enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a somewhat slow start, but Mindsplice with Augury is pretty great. Start by fetching. Could get Swamp. So the Verge is online, and we have double black for an eventual Sweeper. Although against Archive, Surveil stock up into the graveyard. That may not be quite as important. Yeah, I could also just get another island for now. Keep up Denial and Augury. Might want to hang on to Augury until after we play Apparatus. Next turn I can fetch a Forest. Alright, opponent going for stock up. I'll let that resolve. So this could be Omniscience combo once again, in which case I'm not opposed to just tapping out for Apparatus main phase to make sure it resolves, since there's no threat of any combo kill, since there's no Omniscience in graveyard. Opponent's got a discard to hand size. Gets rid of Dispersal, so yeah, this looks like Omniscience combo. So let me just fetch a Forest, cast Apparatus, and then next turn we're shields up with the Spectral Denial and Augury to proliferate onto the Apparatus. So we're pretty comfortable playing this matchup, although Blast Zone can eventually interfere. Although, as we mentioned in the previous game, Augury can also maybe mess it up. Stock up number 3. Opponent slowly sculpting the perfect hand. And discards an Awakening. So they might have more in hand. And let's get our bargain. Not going to be proliferating Blast Zone just yet. And yeah, I guess I'll just pass a turn for now. Finding a way to extract the Awakening with our cover-up could also be useful. We currently only have the 1 counter spell, so we can't feel too safe. Maybe start with... yeah, I guess I can bargain. Although if our opponent has Confounding Riddle, they can counter back, and then if I want a Denial, they can pay for it. So maybe I start with Augury. And get Revelation. Although that's maybe overkill when we have another one in hand. Cast Bargain. I guess I could have kept some mana untapped for Denial or another Augury. Robberies are eventual win condition. But I kind of just want the lands here, and the Revelation can shuffle Robbery back. So yeah, I could have cast another Augury to maximize our mana last turn. Now, still only have the 1 counter spell, but that's probably enough to keep me alive for now. Can Augury again. Finds 3 steps ahead. And now we can start making copies of Mindsplice Apparatus. Which is how we take over. Opponent is looking at Blast Zone, but that's going to take them a few turns to get up to 4 counters. So maybe keeping 1 Augury to proliferate afterwards could be worth it. Alright, let me just try this anyways. Create a token, draw to discard. Can pay for Riddle. Alright, I'll pay for it. And then they might Riddle once again. but then they're not taking a blast zone. Right, that resolves. Sewers can go. So we get a 7 mana discount. So I should be able to Revelation for 10. While keeping up a counterspell. And then we get to untap 5 lands, so we didn't actually tap any lands to cast it. So we're hoping to find some bargains. Opponent had another riddle left over. Counter unless you pay 7. Finally resolves. Untap 5 lanes. And did not find any bargains, but plenty of counter spells. So I think we'll be alright. 3 steps ahead can also draw. Opponent going for invasion. Can counter draw, make a copy. Only cost me 2 blue mana. So our opponent's in trouble here. And that'll do it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We've got Apparatus, double bargain, just missing some lands. Think I still try it, hope to just surveil into lands with a hedge maze. And I'll keep a sewers. So a little slow out of the gates, but our opponent's also not particularly aggressive. And then say no to the edict, just need land number 4. Theater could point towards a reanimator strategy. Cover up is a way to exile cards from graveyard, as we see the Overlord milling a scrapwork mutt. Yeah, judging from the mana base, I don't think this is a Civ 6 ceremony deck, since Pylons and Mountain are a bit of a nombo with it. So it's probably just more of a classic creature reanimator deck. Okay, so hopefully we don't need to counter anything. We get to bargain, find a land, and then get the Mindsplice online. And Mutt resolves. Could see them discard a scary creature here. No, just a land. And I see, Faithful is how they're planning to reanimate. And I'll just take 2 lands, I think. So cover up is enabled, we can end of turn Mindsplice and get the party started. So yeah, no creatures to get back. Possible our opponent's running cards like Abrade to destroy artifacts. But for now, fear of missing out resolves. And let's see if the Apparatus gets to untap. It does. Alright, Augury's a nice pickup as well. Could already cast a Deadly Cover-Up, but honestly, I think I'm fine just taking 5. And then pass with a plan of maybe using 3 steps ahead to make a copy of Mindsplice Apparatus. For now, take 5. Another fear. Yeah, let's just counter copy and hope they don't abrade me a response. And then I can augury with both copies of Mindsplice on the battlefield, so they each pick up an extra counter. Would also be good if we can wait for Overlord to show up before we wipe the board. Alright, so step 1, augury. And I'll just take a land. Could also proliferate on the Overlord, but I actually think we want to let it enter the battlefields. And then we've got a ton of options if we just pass a turn here. With Teachings getting more instant speed interaction. Could also get our instant that can destroy creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. I render inerts, so they can immediately attack with Overlord. I guess with a Fear, that's potentially a lot of damage. Could also get an Aetherize with Mystical Teachings, to be fair. So, a couple of ways we can handle this. But I don't mind just counter... make another copy. And then we'll let the Fear attack twice. Can afford to take a bit more damage. And then end of turn Bargain, untap, cover up, board is nice and clean. And take over from there. So this I can cast for just a single green mana. Finding another 3 steps ahead and a land. And may as well Teachings. Can also flash it back pretty easily. And yeah, the Necropsy is a potential solution as well for multiple threats. Kind of just like getting another Bargain or Augury to proliferate. So we get an even bigger discount to set up Revelation. Could do it now. And get another 3 steps. Yeah, we've got such an overwhelming mana advantage now. So I could cast Finale. So I probably want to cover up before we Finale. And get rid of maybe your Overlords. And yeah, opponent's hand's not particularly powerful. Do see Volgavoth, Etali, Atraxa, so those are the cards they're trying to reanimate. And then now I can Revelation for 10. Could have maybe flashed back first, but now it's back in the deck, and yeah, we'll just pass. Double Augury to proliferate some more, and then it's just a matter of time until we find our Robbery to close it out. We are at 5, so we do have to be a little bit careful. Can't counter Unearth, but we can probably find a removal spell if we want to. Sure, we'll Edict. Opponent looking to get back Etali. And we can just counter, draw, make another copy of Mindsplice. And we'll see how long our opponent wants to stick around. And the answer is they've had enough, understandably. But yeah, we're pretty close to fetching up our Robbery and then just exiling the opponent's entire deck, as well as getting to maybe cast some of their finishers to close out the game if we don't mill them out completely. Sweet, so we get to see this Sultai Mindsplice deck in action. And yeah, unless you face aggro and the opponent can quickly overwhelm you, this deck has an incredibly powerful late game, with Mindsplice giving you an overwhelming mana advantage, and then Bargain seems like the perfect way to kind of hold the deck together as a cantrip to help find whatever interaction you need, and then essentially a free spell with enough counters on the Mindsplice apparatus to find even more interaction and more card draw, so it kind of chains together very beautifully. And then it's also a 6 mana card for collect evidence purposes, so we always get to extract a key card out of the opponent's deck with the cover-up, as well as enabling the Necropsy. So yeah, very happy with how this deck turned out. A lot of wiggle room, of course, when you've got cards like the teachings to find different one-offs, so there's a lot of room for customization. But for now, I'm pretty happy with how this deck worked out. So that'll do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.